Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, everyone. My name is Bridget. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Bridget.
It's an honor to be here. It really is. I remember it was maybe a couple of years ago. Courtney had said to me, we stayed in touch when she moved down here, and she said, "I think you'd really love it down here." I was like, "Oh," and that always stayed with me. And here I am, and I moved here 2 months ago. So God speaks to me through other people because I can't always hear directly. I just don't have that clear of a pipeline, I guess. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, what I was like, and then I'm going to talk about what happened, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm like today, I hope. And I was going to begin by something I brought with me, and that is some years ago at a meeting. And what time do you guys want me to finish up? About 10 of 8? Would that be good? Enough time for chips and things? Okay, yeah, 10 of 8, I'll keep an eye on that. I was at a meeting, and I turned off all the lights, and I had a piece of paper with me and a pen, and I asked these 14 or 15 or so people that were with me to describe what it was to be an alcoholic. And I wrote down the answers, and I feel like this describes me, and I'm going to read what they said that night. And they said, we want what we want now, and we want it our way. Immature. Do things fast, in a hurry, many at the same time. I like the buzz. For me, rushing is mood altering. Prone to stinking thinking and negativity. The grass seems greener elsewhere, not easily satisfied with the present things, places, and events. More, different, better. Why? Not enough. I'm a malcontent. My sponsor used to call me a chronic malcontent, not just a malcontent. Low self-worth, sensitive, extreme at times, overblown fears, especially of the future, problems with thinking, special, different, ego, angry, false excitement, lonely, impatient, selfish, self-centered to the extreme, controlling, and don't trust easily. I wrote at the bottom of the page, I'm an alcoholic, I'm lonely, afraid, and I hate myself. And that's how I came into this program. We talk about the ism a lot here, and I always thought alcohol was my problem. And once I put down alcohol, I was going to be okay, and life was going to be okay. And then I found out I had alcoholism, and I have a lot of isms. And one of them, I heard these little funny, we use these little, things in Alcoholics Anonymous. One I heard was, I sponsor myself, and I have to be careful about that, Another one is, I sabotage myself. I'm good at that. It could be a sunny day, I'm with my husband, what's wrong? Kind of thing. Another one is, I have an incredibly short memory, and I do. I tend to forget. When I don't stay plugged into my program, I'm like, God? Alcoholic, what's that? I forget. Another one for me is, I scare myself. That's a good one. And my hope in this program is that I've learned to support myself. That's my last one. So a little bit about me. I think I just described myself in that list, though. So I think you're going to, hopefully hear a little bit about that when I talk a little bit about how I was. It all started innocently for me, and I can identify characteristics within myself well before I picked up my first drink that are alcoholic. And that was... I was the girl in the classroom who would rush to finish her work, and then I would rush to the front of the class so everyone could see how smart I was. And I did that because for me, and I speak for myself, this is my experience, the root of my disease is not enough. That's how I felt all of my life. I felt it when I was 5 years old. I felt it when I was 27 years old when I walked into the rooms of this program. By the way, my sobriety date is July 8th, 1988. And I have a home group, and I sponsor women, and I have a sponsor who has a sponsor. So what I learned about myself through working this program was, I have these misguided coping skills, character defects, whatever we like to call them, and they all started innocently. And as I looked at myself in this program through the 12 steps, I got to watch them grow. So I started out by being dishonest. I was a little girl at the store with my dad, and I took a magazine. And then I showed my dad, see, Dad, look what I did, hoping I'd get that approval I was always looking for and that he would love me. And that grew over time, the dishonesty and needing approval from people outside of myself. I knew nothing about a higher power at that time. I was the young lady at school who would steal your boyfriend because you were prettier than I was, and if I got your boyfriend, then that made me enough for a little while. I was the one that was rifling through the babysitting houses' cabinets for the drugs that they had, or liquor or whatever they had, because I have a disease of more. And my experience is I took other sundry items so I could drink more alcohol. that allowed me to drink more. So, my story included a lot of other stuff. I used to get invited to, people's homes, and I wouldn't get invited back. Girlfriends growing up in the neighborhood, and I was wondering, well, what's wrong with me? Why don't they want to be my friend? And there was alcoholism in my home, and that, but I self-indicted, because that's what I do. I take responsibility, I take the blame, I take over responsibility, and I have a self-centered nature, and I make it about me. So, of course, there was something wrong with me, and that's why they didn't want to see me any longer. So, what I try to remember about my drinking story is it was progressive. I picked up my first drink when I was 13 years old, and I did so because I didn't want to be alone, very simply. The kids in the neighborhood, were getting together, they were going to have some drinks, and I thought, if I say no, I'm going to be alone again, and I'm going to be lonely, and I'm going to be all by myself. And I didn't want that, so I said yes. And then I started to drink without my permission for a long, long time. I drank and abused other things for the next 14 years. And what I tried to remember about that is the 5 worst things that happened to me. And I can share 2 of them with you. The other 3 I share only with a sponsor because they're very personal. But, my mom and dad were trying with me, and, they didn't know what was going on with me and why I was doing the things I was doing. And I was arrested for felony drug possession one night. I was down in South Florida at this time. I was born in a small town in New York. I grew up in Connecticut. And now we've moved down to South Florida, where I got to pick up the pace really fast. And this is how my alcoholic mind thinks. So here I am. I've been booked, mugshot, the whole thing, right? I'm in the cell. The chick next to me is freaking out, and I'm like, oh, And my alcoholic thinking was, it's 2:00 in the morning. The bar doesn't close till 4. When are they going to let me out of here? Because I wasn't finished. That's how I drank. I had to drink until I was finished. And when I was finished, all bets were off. We talk about the word powerlessness in this program, and I've heard many women over the years share with me, well, if I drink, I don't know what's going to happen, or I think this will happen, or, that might. And I'm like, for me, powerlessness was, I would take a drink. I didn't know what the hell was going to happen, and I still don't today. God forbid that ever becomes something that would come into my reality. I can't safely predict what's going to happen to Bridget when I put a drink of alcohol to my lips, because I've ended up with people, places, and things that were very dangerous, and I had no business being there. And I'm surprised I'm still alive many times. So I had a felony arrest, and then after that, my parents, they were kind of done with me. I came home one day, and my few belongings were on the front porch, and they said, sayonara, we're done with you. We'll see you later. And I had nowhere to go. I had no money. I didn't have a car. And I have experienced homelessness in my drinking. That's where it took me. Here I wasn't. I had an education. I had gone to a secretarial school for a year. I was very employable. But I wasn't interested in working. Working got in the way of my drinking. Seriously. We moved down to Fort Lauderdale, and I got a job at the Sheraton Hotel in the sales office. And I would go out on my break, and I would look around, and I would wonder how I could get what these people had, which looked like freedom to drink. That's what I wanted. So the only way I knew how to do it was to become a dishonest person and steal and do the things that I was doing, and get arrested, so much so that my parents were done with me. So that went on for a while, and it's funny because maybe I couldn't get things to eat every day, but I sure got stuff to drink. That was a big priority for me. And drinking always came first. I always found food got in the way of drinking. I didn't have much time for that. If that was we're gonna take away from the drinking time. So, what happened to me was, I ended up getting a job. I got a good job while I was homeless. I ended up getting an apartment. I ended up looking really good on the outside. Now I had the car, I had the watch, I had the purse, I had it all. I was pulling up to the nightclubs, the champagne rooms, all that. Because I'm still that scared little girl, that wasn't enough. And if you saw what I had, you'd know, now I'm enough. See, Bridget's arrived, right, kind of thing. Look, I got the car and all that kind of stuff. It didn't work. The hole was just getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And I thought one night I was having a heart attack. And I was glad. And I thought, it's over now. Now I can go to a hospital and they're going to stop me from drinking because I couldn't stop. And I'd been trying by that time. And I had tried a Reader's Digest article. I'd gotten pills. You're supposed to not drink when you take them. I took the pills and I drank. All this kind of crazy nonsense. Illness is what it was. That was how my alcoholism presented itself. And, I got to a place where I couldn't do it anymore. Inside, it was so dark, and I was so alone. My longest relationships were one night. That's where I was in my life, and I had no one. I didn't have a friend. I was working at the time, and that was about it. My world was like this. It was very small. It had become very, very small, and it was arranged around drinking. I couldn't travel. I couldn't go far because I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to get enough liquor wherever I was going, and that kept my world very, very, very small. So I went back to my childhood church, to a God I didn't understand, and I asked for help. And I believe my prayer was answered. I ended up calling in the Yellow Pages for help. This was quite a few years ago, obviously, and I ended up going to a 30-day after-work treatment plan kind of thing. And I made a big mistake, and that was I didn't take the suggestions. And we know how that works out. And it didn't work out for me either. I'm surprised I'm not different. And a big issue that I had was men. Men was my other addiction. I had a lot of addictions, plenty, all of them basically. And I got involved in a relationship and the program and blah, blah, blah. And we ended up going out together and using together. And July 8th of 1988, it was getting late. It was 8 o'clock at night. He was over my apartment. And I said, I want to go back to the meetings and I want to get a white chip. Are you going to come with me? Well, long story short, 11 o'clock that night, it was the last meeting in town. There were lots of meetings there. And I went. And I got a white chip. I still have that white chip. And I treasure that white chip. Sometimes I take it out and I hold it. And I meditate with it, how much it means to me. That was the night that I surrendered. I surrendered to this program, and I was desperate. And we know what we say in this program, that the desperate become sweetly willing. And that was me. I was very willing. And I took the suggestions, and I'll share a little bit with you now for the time we have left about some sober experiences that I can remember. So I got a home group, and it was called the Express Group at the time. It was in Fort Lauderdale, South Florida. And it was I was younger at the time, and it was a younger people's group, and we were the people in that group who had gotten on the express train to get to the program, like we had gotten on the fast train, right? That's how we thought about it. And it was a great group. It was a lot of young people. It was very social. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to be with people. So I tried to get involved and, make coffee. Would you like some sugar? I mean, that's how bad it was for me. I just really didn't know what to say to people. There's people here. What do I do? And I don't have a drink, right? I don't have my comfort, my solution. So I'm at this group, the Express Group, and my car broke that night. And I thought, my first thought was, I'll call a cab. And I was like, what? And it was that night I learned, wait a minute, maybe I can ask one of these people here for help. Right? And I did. And well, it was a guy. Well, that was, it was progress. But I did ask for a ride home because I didn't know how to lean into a we. I knew nothing about that. I'm a third child. I'm a Virgo, very independent, right? And I didn't know how to do that. So now I'm going to meetings, and I was attending this meeting called Saturday Night Live, and I walked in, and there was a woman with beautiful long hair, and she would pray, and she seemed so peaceful, and I sat down next to her, and I just got this big peaceful vibe from her, and she gave me a book of daily reflections at the time, and in the book she wrote, "You never have to drink again, even if you want to." Well, that just blew my mind. I didn't know what that meant. I was like, what does that mean? That's whatever. And it took me time to understand what that meant to me. And what that meant was, at about 9 months sober, I was in a relationship, which I had no business being in, again, because that's what I did. And I got really upset in the relationship. And it was a Saturday night, and I wanted to drink. And I was going to drink. I'd made a decision. That's it. I'm in pain. I don't like to feel uncomfortable. So I'm going to get some drinks. And so I thought, wait a minute. I have a sponsor. Let me call. So I called my sponsor, and I said, I'm very upset, and I'm going to drink. And she said, I think you are. I said, oh, my God, that didn't help. So what do I do now? So I did something I had never done before in my whole life, and that is I went out on the porch of my apartment, and I asked a power greater than myself that I hardly understood at the time for help. And I went to a meeting. I got in my car, and I used smart feet, and I got myself to the meeting. And I shared, and I cried at the meeting. And the woman lined up like we do, and they hugged me, and I didn't drink that night. And that year, when I got my first year chip, my sponsor was there. And I said to her, Cheryl, I've never had an obsession to drink this year except that one, time. And she said to me, she filled me with so much hope, she said, and you never have to again if you continue to do a few simple things. And I never forgot that. I hung on to that. That was the hope for me at the time, a lot of hope. So here I am, sober a little bit now, and I'm very involved. I'm doing the service, I'm doing everything they tell me to do. My car is full of literature. I'm going to the women's detention center. I'm doing all this stuff, and I go to it, I'm still in relationships though, right? And I go to this meeting, this women's meeting, and we were sharing, and this woman cross-talked to me, and I'll never forget what she said to me, and I was so grateful that she cross-talked. Like, we're not supposed to cross-talk in AA, right? But she, looked directly at me, and she was, because I was sharing about relationships and my problems and whatever, probably. And she said, girl, or something like that, you got it all wrong. And I was like, huh, right? And she said, your priority is to first have a relationship with your higher power. I was like, oh. And she said, and then yourself. And I was like, oh. And then with others. And I never forgot that. And that gave me a foundation of how to have relationships, because I always placed you first. I was somewhere, second, third, fourth, or fifth. I'm not sure where I was. And God was somewhere, maybe up in the sky. I'm not sure. But that was the beginning for me of having a relationship with a higher power, which has just been one of the most important aspects of this program for me. Because life happens. If I, please don't ever let me say you when I'm sharing, if I stick around long enough, which I'm starting to, I'm going to experience life on life's terms, which I have. And the winds get rough. They've gotten rough for me over times. But I have been able to stand on a bedrock. We use that word in the first step in the 12 and 12 bedrock. I've looked it up, what it means, and it's very solid. It's what things are built on, and it doesn't waver. And that's been my experience with my sobriety. So that was a very important moment for me in my sobriety. Another issue that I deal with and have dealt with is I tend to be a human doing. I have a disease of more. I like, 5 fires going at the same time. and, put the gas pedal down. Let's go, kind of thing. And I remember one time I told my sponsor, I was like, I was in church the other day and I was thinking I should go back to the hospital and volunteer. And she's like, oh, Bridget's revving up again, And that's what I tended to do in recovery, right? So I was getting ready to go on a little trip to Key West. We were for vacation when I was working, and I went to see my doctor before that. And I was like, yeah, I got some things to think about down in Key West. I got to do this or that. And he looked at me and he goes, how about just relax and enjoy yourself? And I was like, that's a tall order, for me. Like, that's still hard. My sponsor has said to me recently, you have trouble relaxing, don't you? And I was like, sometimes I do still, yeah. I mean, I've gotten better. There's been some progress. But my value, that was a value issue for me. My value issue always came from doing. In my household, the home I grew up in, which I'm not supposed to call anyone else an alcoholic, but there were issues in the home, let's just say. If you were moving, they couldn't hit you. So I became, a human doer kind of thing, right? They couldn't hit a moving target. And I learned to be good. That was how I stayed safe, is to be a good girl kind of thing. So that's been, a long time to get rid of that too. So here I am now. I'm living in South Florida. I'm sober a little while. It's been wonderful. And, I decided with some outside help that it was a good idea for me to step away from relationships because I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't bringing to the table what I would like to bring to a table in a relationship. So someone had suggested, 90 days without a relationship. Well, that 90 days turned into almost 2 years. And, I remember I used to call my sponsor and I'd be like, well, what do I do? It's Saturday night. I don't know what to do. And she goes, well, you've already been to enough meetings this week. She goes, why don't you take a bath or read a mag? I was like, I didn't know how to live. I really didn't know how to live without alcohol. I was lost without alcohol. I spent, all those years just drinking all the time. So in those 2 years, I got to know Bridget a lot better. And what I did was I had gone through the steps one time with my sponsor at the time. And we got to the 12th step. And I was kind of like, well, I don't really like spiritual awakening. I'm not really feeling it. Was that it? Is that all there is kind of thing? And I heard about this step group at a treatment center called Bark in South Florida. And they took us through the steps in a year. And it was an experiential step group. And we were given an assignment every month or suggestions every month. And we would go out and experience the step for that month, and then we'd come back and share our experience. That changed my life, and it changed my approach to the steps. When I finished that step group, I felt like I could fly if I wanted to. I had this spiritual awakening. I had this experience of my higher power, of the joy of helping other people, what they really mean by the joy of living, which is, for me, to share love, to give and receive love. And I started to use that model for many years. I've tweaked it over time with some things that I've learned or other things that have spoken to me, but doing the step a month has been an amazing journey, which I'll talk about maybe a little more later. But so I'm in South Florida now, and my boss came over to me and he's like, well, you're 30 years old, you're never going to meet anyone. And I said, okay. I was kind of feeling it too, because I thought by 30 I'd be married and have a child. I didn't even have a boyfriend, So he said, why don't we put an ad in the International Herald Tribune and you'll have pen pals from all over the world? And I said, that's kind of a crazy idea. And he said, I'll pay for it. I said, okay. So we did. And the letters started to come. And there was this letter from Greece. And, he looked very nice. And long story short, and I had always wanted to go to Germany. My mom is from Germany. And I thought to myself, well, maybe I could meet this pen pal over there. And I did. And I prayed about it, of course, before I went. And we ended up falling in love. And I long distance dated him for 2 years or so. And then it came time to make a decision. And he asked me if I wanted to move to Greece. And I did what I was taught to do in the program, and that is I spoke to 3 people that I respected. One was my sponsor. She highly suggested I didn't do it. The second was my priest at my church, who was a recovering alcoholic, and my parents. And I prayed and meditated on it. And what I got to was that God wanted me to go there, and it would probably be one of the most difficult things I'd ever do. So I tried to say yes to God, and I did. And I went there, and I ended up living there for 14 years. And for 13 years, I wanted to come back. And I didn't. And I waited, and I prayed, and I was of service. And I started a group there, and I started to meet women there who had never done the steps. And, they were coming to me in a lot of pain. And I was like, have you ever done a fourth step? No. Like, let's do a fourth step. And like they started to warn people, stay away from Bridget, she'll put you on a fourth step. Which was true, because that's what I knew to do, right? For me, that's been my solution, is to clear out, to bring this stuff to the light. My feelings, my harms, all that kind of stuff needed resurrection, light, truth. It needed to come out and be witnessed by another person and my higher power. So, that was a blessing for me, and I got to teach over there and do a lot of things in recovery. So I'm visiting New York one year, and I would go to a lot of meetings when I would come here, because there were 2 meetings a week in my area that I started. And sometimes no one would come to the meeting. And I would go there with my big book, and I would wait, and I would pray. And sometimes someone would come back. They had just relapsed, and I would be sitting there and waiting for them, and sometimes no one would come. Other times it was 15 people. It was just a roll of the dice. And it was really an exercise in trusting God for me. So now I'm traveling to New York, and I'm going to meetings, and I don't want to get back on that plane again. I really don't. God, please, anywhere USA, anywhere, any town USA. And I go to an 11-step meeting, and I'm sitting there listening, knowing I got to get on the plane soon. And the guy says, God's will might not always be the easier, softer way, but you are where you're needed. And I thought to myself, oh. And I got back on the plane, and I understood what he was saying and how God was speaking to me, that's where my higher power wanted me to be at that time. There were different reasons, and I won't get into it. Recovery was a big one. But that was very helpful to me, and it represented another one of my hundreds of thousands of forms of surrender in this program. I heard one time that AA is a program of, 1,000 surrenders, and sometimes they're all in one day. And I get that. I really do. It's a surrender. It's always a constant surrender for me. It's not like, okay, God, like that. I learned things in Greece. I remember I was out with my sponsor one night for coffee, and we were all sitting around, and she sat down, and the guy was there, and he was talking about he does computers or something, and she looked at him, she goes, oh, I don't know anything about that. And I thought, oh, she admitted she doesn't know anything about that. Oh my God, right? Like, what's he going to think? And it was such an experience of humility for me, because the way I grew up, you had to know, and knowing kept me safe. Today, and I've learned in AA, I always want to say in AA, that not knowing keeps me humble. And I think the humble is a better fit for me, kind of thing. So that was just a very powerful experience. And, I was staying with my sister in New York that time when I was going to that meeting. And my sister is active with other substances, not drugs and alcohol. And, I was judging her. Surprise, right? This is before I found Al-Anon. And, I have a tendency as an alcoholic, I grew up with criticism. And they say that those who grew up with criticism learn to criticize. And I'm not blaming anyone. I don't do that today. I have awareness today that, sometimes things come from what I've learned. And I was judging my sister pretty harshly, and I called an AA friend, which is something I've learned to do when I'm challenged, right? And she said to me she goes, Bridget, your job is not to judge. That's God's job. She goes, your job is to love and forgive. And I never forgot that. And it turned my whole trip around that, I have family members, I have sponsees, I've lost people in this program. I have an active sister right now calling me, and which I don't talk to for more than like 30 seconds, if that. And it's my job to have compassion. Someone asked me something the other day about something, and I said, you know what? I live in a glass house. I really don't have much to say about that, because anytime like I'm judging someone for doing something, there's a more sober voice in my head, I hope, and it's like, you've done that many times, and I have. So the hell am I to, I want to be judge, jury, and executioner, and I'm not qualified. So that's been a growth opportunity for me many times over. So now I am still in Greece, and I'm praying 13 years to come back. And a friend of mine says, I think you'd really like it in Cary, North Carolina. And I was like, I paid attention again, right? And I was downtown in the middle of Athens, Greece, where it's a population of like 4 million people. And I ran into a woman from America. And she looked at me, she goes, I think you'd really like North Carolina. And I said, oh, okay. And I'm listening again, right? I'm like, pay attention here, God's talking. So we visited North Carolina in 2006, and we really liked it. And by then, I had prayed long and hard enough, I guess, that God said, okay, you can go. And I came here to get a job in education. I wanted to work in the public school system, and I had prepared myself. So I applied, and wouldn't you know, they had a problem with my felony arrest record. I couldn't believe it. And I was like, oh no, it was very serious because I didn't really have any other skills that I was prepared to look for a job. So, I did what I was taught to do, and that was to show up as a sober woman of dignity. And I asked him if I could come talk to them about it. And I got in my car, and I prayed the third step prayer over and over and over again. And I showed up and I sat in front of this guy, Sam White, and I said, Sam, you know what? That did happen. That was 1981. And yep, that happened all right. And I said, and that's not who I am anymore today. Would you be willing to give me a chance? And he sent me home, and I got a call the next day, and they hired me. And I got to work for 15 years with students with special needs and behavior support. I didn't even know what that job was when I applied for it. I came here to teach English as a second language, okay? And how I got the job was I was at Best Buy, and I started to chat up a woman about the computer she was looking at, and she said, they're hiring at my school. And I said, oh yeah, what kind of job? She said, behavior support. I said, okay, that sounds interesting. And I, went there, and I was like, oh my God, these kids are in gangs. It's a mess here, right? So I got to do that for 15 years, and it's interesting how God works because I had safety issues, right? Like I didn't grow up in a safe home. And now here I am in this classroom with these children, and they have knives and different things are going on. And, I'm in charge, and, I learned a lot. And I got to experience my fourth step every day at that job. And I ended up loving those children. And it helped me to experience, to see the good in people, regardless of what choices they make in life. I have students that are in prison for murder, and I love them. I really do. I hate what they did, and I love the person. And I think that's a gift from God, that God gave me to be able to do that. So my dad passed away when I was living in North Carolina. I got to go down and say goodbye to him. My brother was also there. My brother, again, I don't know that my brother was an alcoholic. He sure drank and took a lot of drugs like I did. He was there when I went, and he had cancer at the time, and he was very sick when my dad was passing. And my dad passed on July 4th, and 3 days later, my brother got in a car accident, and he died too. So I got to be there for that for my mom, and my daughter was with me. Thank God I had a daughter at that time. I still do. She was with me, I mean. She's good. But I remember that week I was there, and it was probably one of the most difficult things I've done in sobriety, obviously. My brother was just one of those that didn't make it. When I look at you guys, you're my brother. And I mean that sincerely. Like, you're the brother that made it when I see guys in the program. And I just love that, I feel so close to you. So I was tired. I was hot. It's South Florida. It's July. And I wanted to go home. And I really wanted to go home. So what I did was I went to a meeting every day instead. And I sat down the day I lost my brother between two women who were sober, just as I think I was picking up like my 32-year chip at the time or whatever. And they said to me, she looked at me and she goes, "Don't miss the blessing because you have other plans." And that stopped me in my seat. I was like, oh, I better listen here. I think God is asking me to do something else. And I stayed. And I went home when I felt like it was time that my mom would be okay and that, my higher power was supporting me in leaving. In the last couple of years, I was diagnosed with cancer. And that was not something I expected in my life. I was on the phone with it was a teacher work day. I was home and I was cooking. And I got a call from a sponsee, and she was very upset. And I said to her, "Hold on, let me turn the stove off. I want to, hear what you want to share." So I went on the back porch, and I'm listening to her. And I was doing a self-exam under my arm. Now, I've never self-examined my entire life because I never thought I'd get cancer, and I did my right. And I found a lump, and I went to the doctor, and they told me it was cancer, and you're going to have this and that and the other thing. And that was a whole period of, 2 years or so of treatments and chemotherapy and losing my hair and losing my eyebrows and losing my eyelashes and being very, very sick. And the people in this fellowship carried me. And when I say carried me, they literally carried. I have a box at home of love and support, I call it. There's cards, there was oranges, everything. Blankets, everything, the calls. They held me when I cried. They carried me. And so this was during COVID. And I'm going to go for a walk now. Right now I'm doing chemotherapy, so I'm immunocompromised. And I put it, I was wearing a mask. This is not about masks or not masks. I don't get into outside issues. But I was wearing a mask because I was immunocompromised, and I was told to do that. And I'm walking, down the path, and this woman passed by me, and I tried to, and she looks back and she goes, "A mask in the forest?" Just like that. And I was like, really? What I wanted to do, right? So I kept my cool, and I kept moving forward like I'm taught to do in AA, right? And she said it again, louder. So fortunately, in a moment, what I like to call a moment of sobriety, I remembered this Irish guy that used to go to my meeting, and he had an Irish accent. "My name's Bridget Fogarty. Just give me a good Irish accent. I'm good, right?" And he used to say, "Take the high road. It's less crowded." So that came in my mind, and I thought, and there happened to be a hill, and I thought, oh, here I go up the hill. And I let her go, and I said, my. What would a woman who has that asset say and do, is what I ask myself. And God meets me in my willingness, has been my experience. When I first came to this program, I was very, very willing to do what was suggested to me to stay sober because I didn't want to experience the pain and to live like I was living. It was a very painful existence for me, internally and externally. It was, I was killing myself on the slow plan. So I'll share one more quick story with you. Last year I was doing my step of the month, and it was June. And when I retired, I went to Wilmington for a couple of days. Now, when I go on trips, I love to rush home. I don't know why. Like, if it's the morning, I'm leaving 6 o'clock, I'm going to be on the road in the morning, right? So I thought, well, no, you're doing your 6th step. Let's be willing to do this differently today. Let's calm down. Let's go a little slower, right? So that morning, I had breakfast. I went to a meeting. I'm getting on the road, and the light comes on my car. And I was like, what the heck is that? So I pulled into the gas station and looked in the book, and it says, I need air in my tire. I was like, okay. So I'm trying to put air in the tire. Well, I'm letting air out of the tire, I'm sure, because I'm just not capable of stuff like that. There was a guy there he had a cowboy hat on. I thought, he looks like he knows what he's doing. He had a big truck. So he comes over with his own air pump, and I'm like, right? Yeah. So he put the air in the tire, and what he found was there was a nail in the tire. And had I gotten on the highway that morning, I really don't know what would have happened. I had to go to a tire shop and get it repaired before I went home. So God meets me in my willingness, and God has always kept me safe from myself in all situations in sobriety. I'll close with something my sponsor has told me, and she said, I have a disease of perception. I forget that I've been given the passenger seat, not the driver's. So I am a passenger, and I forget that I'm a bozo on the bus. You know, I have a friend in AA, and I'll call her up and say, how you doing, fellow bozo? You know, and that knocks me down a few pegs, because I can still, I'm pretty special. Well, we all are, aren't we? Kind of thing, you know? And I also heard in a meeting in New York that God will never give you more than you can handle, but sometimes you have to go to bed early. So it's getting close to my bedtime. I better finish up there. Thanks all for your listening and being here tonight. Thank you.